Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sebastien. It's an absolute pleasure to be here in this beautiful theater for my first visit to Georgia. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to get the most out of tech events and tech conferences. And before I do that, I'd like to briefly tell you a little bit more about myself. So my name is Sebastien. I work for the Next Web, originally from Belgium, now based and living in Amsterdam. And I spend most of my time connecting startups with investors, mentors, and corporates. My goal is really do everything that I can to help companies to make those connections and to essentially understand how they need to grow their companies. Today what I want to do is share with you a few practical tips that I sort of learned along the way on how you can do that as a company. So the last sort of 3 years, I've been really roaming around the world to different events and conferences, trying to find some of the most interesting startups for our clients and being able to sort of help them build those connections. So the first tip that I have for you today is this one. When you go to an event or a conference, you should really know what you're there to accomplish. And I know how that sounds, right? Hold on a minute. Did you come all the way to Georgia to tell us something that we already know and that's so obvious? Yes, I came to you to remind you that it's really, really important to know what you're there to accomplish, because this is what I see most of the time. I show up to an event, it's day 1, 10 a.m., maybe let's say 11, and I see startups that are walking around the business floor like they're completely lost. They missed the badge collection the day before, they missed the opening because they were late with their flights, they were trying to sort out their Airbnb, which turns out to be on the other side of town, and they're really like, what am I doing here? Oh, this is kind of cool, music startup. Let's check it out. Maybe I'll figure out where my next meeting is later if I haven't missed it. Or they're just walking like this, looking around for a friend. Like, you know, they got a pass to join the event from one of their contacts and they just decided to show up and see what happens, downloaded the app in the toilets in between a couple of potential meetings and just thinking, what am I doing here? This is how you really want to join a conference, with a clear goal in mind. Now, why is that important? The question that I get asked most of the time by startups is, which conference should I go to? It's a very good question, and at the same time, it's a very complicated one. My answer is always the same. It really depends on what your goals and objectives are. What are you trying to accomplish? Are you raising funding? Are you looking for new corporate partners? Are you trying to get exposure, media? Are you launching a new product or a new service? Depending on sort of what the answer to all those questions are, you're going to decide to go to different events. Your market is also very, very important in there. So you really want to define those goals really clearly from the get-go and be able to prioritize, depending on what those goals are, which conferences you want to go to. If you're looking at the Nordics, then you might consider an event like Slush. If you're a B2B SaaS company, you might look at something like SaaS Talk. So depending on sort of those, my answer is going to really differ based on what you're trying to do. So how do you find out which one is right for you and what those objectives are? You have to do your homework. There's a lot of information that's available online about what conferences are good for, what type of attendees are going there, look at all of the VC firms that we'd be considering, look at the partner list. This is something that takes a lot of time and that you have to prepare generally for months. But by doing your homework the right way, you can define those goals very clearly and then have your team tackle those things very effectively as well. My second tip would be this one. Use all the tools at your disposals to achieve your objectives. So what tools am I talking about? Definitely not those ones. I'd say matchmaking platforms. Now, also, you guys have probably used matchmaking platforms before, and the problem is always the same. They don't work, they're buggy, I can't export my leads, I'm trying to meet some people that I know are at the conference and I can't find them on the platform. That's sort of the events organizer dilemma. It's very, very difficult to organize one that works, but we spend a lot of time focusing on actually creating platforms and tools and applications that work. So please leverage those tools as much as possible. Another thing is this one. I see a lot of startups that really want to stand. They want to exhibit, they want a big space, they want exposure, they want to bring a TV. My advice is the first thing you should focus on when you join an event is meetings, meetings, meetings. Do whatever you can in preparation mode before the conference to schedule as many meetings as you can with investors, with corporates, with mentors, with anybody that you think could be relevant to bring your business to the next level, because that's your opportunity to have a ton of people in the room at the same time and being able to schedule back-to-back meetings that normally would take you weeks to schedule. Another important point with meetings is that a lot of people that join those events and conferences come from all over the world. They're not often here around, in this case in Tbilisi, to be able to meet you. So really make sure that you leverage those tools. The next one that I want to talk about is side events. Side events are great. They would be my favorite way to connect because I think that people primarily connect on an individual basis before they connect on a business base. So I think leverage side events, whether we're talking about an opening party like the one at Art Cafe yesterday with a lot of people around drinks. If you're an evening person, that's perfect. If that's not your thing, that's fine. You can also join those morning runs. There's some VC in Estonia that decided they were going to make it a thing to organize a run at 7 in the morning with all of those crazies that feel like running in the cold. If that's your thing, that's fine. It really helps to connect about something that's very different than business. And then after that, much easier to exchange a business card. The next one would be leverage your network. So that's something very important. When it comes to side events, you have all the ones that you will find in the app and all the emails that you receive from the organizers, but you also have a lot of side events that never make it to those public sites. They're private events, they're partner events. They're often organized by corporates, organized by speakers themselves. Those are the ones you really want to go to because, again, the connections you're going to make with those individuals are really, really valuable. So how do you do that? You talk to anybody that you have in your network that could potentially be connected to organizers, to those clients that's already working with them. Anything that you can do to have access to those more exclusive side events is what I would really focus on. And then sometimes you get the chance to join those really fancy dinners where you can sit next to the speakers, which could be a really valuable way to connect. That's a little bit of a hack. I know it's difficult to do, but if you don't try, it's definitely not going to happen. So the next one is know your metrics. Once again, right, it seems all so simple and so evident, but knowing your metrics is something that's so crucial because not knowing a few of those key metrics when you're having a meeting with an investor is definitely a big deal breaker. So as a startup, it's really important that you know all of your metrics and that you know which ones to present first depending on the people that you're actually talking to. And in knowing your metrics, know the relevant ones. My market size is 700 billion. I've heard that more than once. These are the kind of things that for a few companies can be relevant, but for the vast majority, that's absolute BS. And again, investors hate that. It's a big deal breaker. So make sure that you use metrics that are actually useful, that are truthful, and that will really make the investors tick when they hear it and want to actually ask further questions. So which ones am I talking about? Those are a few examples of the kind of metrics that I would look at. Whether we're talking about MRR, whether we're talking about customer acquisition costs, churn rate, all of those things I think that you should update yourself on before you go to an event or a conference. Make sure you talk to your CFO. Make sure that you talk to your marketing director. That the deck that you have ready to go to the next conference and pitch to that VC is as up to date as possible. And that if asked, you have extra slides where you can actually double down on some of those metrics and really explain them to the people asking you questions. My tip number 4 would be yourself, be a hustler, and be professional. Those are 3 characteristics that I love to see in startups and that I think are often overlooked because you want to be super prepared and you want to look your best self. So be yourself is really important because investors and corporates are looking at teams more than anything else. Companies like Techstars accelerators, when being asked what are the most important things that you look at in a startup when you're reviewing hundreds of applications for one small batch, would be team, team, team. More than your product or more than your solution, the things that people are looking at is who's behind this company and do I believe that those founders are the right one to actually solve that problem in the long run. So make sure that you're yourself because if you want to be in bed with those people for the long run, this is definitely the person that they want to be dealing with. The next one, be a hustler. So this is interesting, right? For startups, nothing's easy. Generally at the beginning, you're small, you don't know how to get connections, you don't know how to get money, all you have is a dream, an idea, and you just want to make it happen. So be a hustler. If you don't ask, the answer is always going to be no. Yeah, I know it's a cheesy quote, right? But as you guessed, I like that kind of stuff. So it's really important that you just sort of, double down on asking whenever possible. Like if I get off the stage, you can just like grab me, ask me questions, try to go around, get all the information that you can. The next one would be, missing one slide, it's fine. But be professional. So what do I mean? I said, if I get off the stage, you can just grab me and ask me more questions. And generally, that would be totally appropriate. I've flown here to help companies to be able to deliver a message and hopefully to bring you a little bit of value. So feel free to just come in and ask me a few more questions. However, if we meet again later tonight after the after party at karaoke and I'm having a beer, then that's probably not the best time to come and pitch me your startups. So I think in this case, try to be mindful as to, where the line between hustling to really get your product out and those connections out versus being inappropriate in pitching your company at the wrong time is something very important. That's something that I've seen startups mess up more than once, and that's something that I would definitely focus on in order to get all the value out of those meetings. The last tip is sort of define the things that you need and allocate your time very seriously. So the first thing is logistics. So when you're planning a trip as a startup and you're going to an event or a conference, there's stuff that takes a ton of time that often you don't think about. Logistics, booking flights, booking accommodation, booking Airbnbs, booking, let's say, where you're going to be having your transit to go to and from the conference, like which team members are going to go, how are we going to organize ourselves for side events. All that stuff takes time, and often startups don't plan it. You're busy, you're running around, you're building your startup, and you just don't think that all those things are basically the little details that you often don't allocate enough time for that end up biting you in the ass at the end. Meetings. Planning meetings ahead. I was mentioning it at the beginning. Use the matchmaking apps, use the tools. Planning meetings is something that's incredibly important. When the conference arrives and you're running around the business floor trying to sit down with all the individuals, hoping that they'll be on time for the meeting, that you actually get the chance to pitch them your solution, this is something you want to basically plan and schedule ahead of time. I would always ask my colleagues in this case, or any other startups that I meet, to plan those things several weeks ahead with their team, divide the list of partners that they want to meet with, divide the list of investors they want to meet with, and decide who should be going where to be able to schedule those meetings. Divide and conquer. There's often so much to do. Startups say, no, but we need to all be there because I need my CFO to run them through the numbers. I need the CEO to be leading the conversations, potentially a marketing person. Most of the time, you don't have time for this. You really want to sort of divide your resources, pick the meetings accordingly, and pair the right individuals in your company, and just take as many meetings as you can when you go to those events. The next one would be swag. As you can see, I just love to live the brand and wear those t-shirts. For most people, this is a little bit outdated. I see so many startups that have those pile of stickers and all of those t-shirts on their desks at conferences. To be honest, this is not what's going to help you to sell your company. It's nice if you have some and you just want to give it out because you like people to be wearing them. But where the value really comes from in understanding what's going to make you stand out. There's so many startups at those conferences that you really want to do something that people are going to notice and people are going to remember. So whether it is like a different types of business card, whether it is bringing an LED strip that you're going to put around the board, whether it is organizing something where you're taking people out of the venue and organizing an event outside and how you're hustling their attention, everything that you want to do is basically grab people's attention. And the last one in this part, and probably the most important one, follow-ups. So we've talked a bit about understanding goals, understanding what your key objectives are, dividing responsibilities, scheduling meetings. You do all that prep work, sometimes for months, before going to a really big event where you want to land new clients, and then you don't follow up on all of your leads. I've seen countless people do that. I've seen a lot of my colleagues do that, and that's an incredible waste of time and resources. It's very costly for you guys when you have to spend 2-3 days going abroad with all the costs that are directly and indirectly associated with this. And if you don't follow up on those conversations in a timely manner and in a way that feels natural, you're wasting your time. So really pay attention and try to follow up with all of the people that you would have met. There's different strategies. A lot of my colleagues like to sort of take the business cards, and then as soon as they're done talking to someone, they go on the side, they take a photo, put them in their CRM directly, write a little note to be able to remember what they've talked about, because if you've had 20 conversations with people during that day, it can be really hard to remember. But really make sure that you spend a lot of time in doing that efficiently. So when do we start with all this? As I said, it can be very difficult to do that if you have a small team. And my recommendation would be do it as early as possible. For most conferences, we sort of start prepping about 2 months in advance and really trying to meet about 3 weeks before when most of the applications and networking apps go live so that you can basically divide those meetings effectively, as I was mentioning earlier, and try as early as you can. Something else that's very important when you're planning to scale your company by going to events and meeting people is building a yearly plan. So if you know that there's 5 or 6 key conferences that you want to visit, you sort of divide that effectively throughout the year, and you allocate different people within your team to cover different conferences in different markets so that all of them are responsible for basically the whole funnel that I've explained to you earlier. So that's a lot of the tips that I wanted to share with you today, and sort of a lot of reminders and little things. It's not rocket science. None of this is stuff that I came up with. They're just sort of my personal observations as to things that I see startups miss most of the time that can really, really improve their return on investments when going to events and conferences, and that I feel should really be on top of mind, because it's very easy to miss the point and essentially waste your time. There's one thing that I would like to leave you with that I haven't touched upon yet. Founders should always be ready to pitch. This is something that came from my co-founder, who truly, truly believes that it's important for companies to be ready to pitch at all times, because you never know when you're going to be landing that client. We talked about meetings and how important it was to schedule meetings when you go to events, but that's very, very formal. We talked about less formal meetings at side events, which can also be very interesting. The thing is, you just need to always be ready. You don't know who you're talking to. You don't know that the person that you've just met at the toilet that happens not to have a badge is. And when they ask you, so what do you do? Like, that's the moment where you can close something, not knowing the individual you're talking to. So always be ready to pitch, because that's what hot startups do. Thank you very much.